Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Stride for the Love of Running webinar series. My name is Evan. I'm your host for this series, and today I'm joined by Andy Harris. Andy, how are you doing?
Good. How's it going, Evan?
Great. I will inform the audience that we are friends. We go back. I feel like quite a long ways. It's been I want to say like almost 10 years or something like that since I ran a race that you were in charge of. Something like that. Time flies by when you're talking about running stuff. I feel like so. For people tuning in today, we're going to be talking all about behind the scenes of race directing, the future of racing with a expert in the race directing world. I do want to plug really quick before we get started. If you're watching live, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. Please give a thumbs up as well. If you're watching, you can feel free to drop any comments on the side chat bar for the YouTube side, and then in the comments on the Facebook stream as well. But yeah, for now, like I mentioned, Andy is an expert race director. You're head of race management for Columbus Running Company in Columbus, Ohio. That holds a near and dear spot in my heart, as I was, an employee there for multiple years. Can you give us a little bit more information just about yourself, maybe even just what you like to do for your own personal running, because you are a runner, and things you like about the running community. So let's just talk about some general running stuff first and foremost.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking. I appreciate you having me on here today. It's always good to talk running with you and everybody. So hope you're all doing well out there in running land. Yep. A little bit about me as a runner. I started late in life. A lot of folks were lucky enough to be interested in running when they were in middle school, high school, those sorts of things. I was a baseball player, so I ran 90 feet, maybe 180 at the most. I got into things in my mid to late 20s, and I'm 42 now, so I've been running for about 14 or so years, and have had varying degrees of competitiveness depending on how much time I allow myself to train. But I'm currently actually, although this COVID-19 quarantine is not good for a lot of things, it's been really excellent for my running. Today, when I get out later, it'll be day 63 in a row for me. So wow. Things are going well. I'm not super fast, but I enjoy competing both with myself and with others. To me, that's what it's being around other folks. And the fact that we can be competitive with each other, but still be friendly. It's always one of those cliches. Let's go beat each other up out on the course and then go have a beer afterward. That's the kind of thing I really enjoy.
Totally. So you mentioned, for you personally, you got into running a little bit later in life. What was the spark and the motivation? Because, from the Stride side, we have a ton of people that, especially now, have decided to get into running. It feels like more people are running, walking, exercising outdoors or indoors more than ever. So what was your sort of motivation to get into exercise and running in particular?
It really stemmed out of, after I had graduated from high school, baseball wasn't really an option anymore. We started playing rec league softball, and you get into late summer and fall leagues, and they kind of speed the game up because everyone wants to get out and have that beer. So the umpires are yelling at you, run in, run out, that sort of thing. And we found that we would get tired when you don't train much. And so a buddy and I said, why don't we train for a 5K that'll probably get us in better shape for softball. Turns out after about a year of doing both, I left softball in the dust and really picked up running as more of a full-time fitness activity.
And did you find, right away in your own personal running experience that it was like easy to latch onto? What were kind of the hardships that you went through when you picked up running for the first time?
The hardest thing, and I would expect this probably applies to a lot of people that are trying running new, especially those of us later in life, is you have the anticipation that anytime we run, we should run as fast as we possibly can. And even in high school, maybe you could do the mile as what you think as fast as you possibly can. But if you're trying to run 2, 3, 10, 20 miles, it's not possible to do that. Yeah. And so really understanding training concepts, that there are such a thing as easy pace, and being comfortable that when you first start out, easy pace might be something that you don't want to admit to your friends. Right. But that's totally fine. We all have to start somewhere. And that, I think that's the most difficult thing for me, even still today. I've been doing this for over a decade. Just know that when it says easy run, you should be able to talk very comfortably.
Right. Totally. What was the first race that you yourself did?
My first race, I believe it was in 2008 or 2009. I was one of 35,000 people that took part in one of the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think I spent more time laterally weaving around people left and right than I did running straight.
Sure.
But then we decided after that run that 5K was not enough. Let's do a half marathon. And we did the Columbus Half Marathon that fall. So
naturally, right? That's the smart progression there.
Oh, yeah.
What was your initial impression about the whole experience of a race? Because a race is not just race day, right? It's from the moment you decide that you have this target, and then you maybe look at a couple different options, whether that's race distance, race courses, race location. There's so much more that goes into race day, than just literally crossing the starting line, hitting the finish line. What was your overall thoughts just about your first race experience?
I think things have changed tremendously in the last 12 to 15 years, where today we have, I've heard some people refer to it as digital community management that you operate before you get to event day.
Yeah.
And you know, from our past experience together, we always talk about this. Race day starts the minute someone signs up.
Yep.
And then the actual event for that person, when they come into a store for an early packet pickup or an expo, that's when the event begins. And so you can't just rely on that time on the course for someone to be excited. I think my first race, they probably had some of those elements. I didn't know I was supposed to care about that.
Right.
So I signed up and I went to pick up my gear. It was in a mall somewhere. They had a packet pickup in a mall. But for me, I think that first event was really mostly just about race day. And then probably by the second event, that event had, even back then, more of those digital community management pieces. They've got the monthly newsletters coming out via email. So I could understand how poorly my training was going compared to what it should have been. And then the expo obviously is a fantastic experience for those events that do it well and stays unparalleled.
Right. So, maybe let's talk a little bit more about what you do now specifically and defining that role. Because I feel like if people normally think about a race day experience, it is inherently not in a negative way, but it's selfish, right? Like you care about yourself, but there's so many things that go on around you to facilitate that race. So maybe talk us through what a race director is, what a whole event management organization looks like. Maybe just define those roles in kind of like a basic way and talk through that.
Yeah, and before we dive into each of those, you mentioned the word selfish, which I think a lot of times can be taken as sort of a negative term. And as a race director, part of my goal with what I'm providing to the event is to allow you the experience to be selfish. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You shouldn't be racing for anyone else, and I'm not saying there aren't a variety of reasons to participate in an event.
Sure.
But the race should really be about you. And if that's all you have to worry about, then I'm doing my job.
Totally.
So from the various roles that I have in the job that I do, so my job title is I'm the director of operations for our event management operation. And what that means in most of my workday is we're working with nonprofit and charitable organizations to help them put on what's generally a 5K fundraiser event. And so they have expertise in what I call their story. I have expertise in the areas of event production, making sure that you as a potential race participant understand what you're getting into, understand what the event is providing, all of those things. An informed potential customer is a happy customer. And so at the very 35,000 foot view, it's really how can I help people understand what they're signing up for so that there are fewer questions as they go into and through that race experience.
Right.
And so we operate, last year we did over 80 events. Most of those we are operating as an event management company. So they're not our events that we own, but we're helping them through many aspects of the event production process. We do own and operate 10 or maybe more of race events. I've lost count.
Yeah.
At this point. But the events that we own and operate, my team and we do serve as the race director of the race committee. And the responsibilities there are not just the technical things like setting up a race website and making sure registration works flawlessly, and then the things we obviously do on race day, like the timing, set up the start finish line area. It's making sure that we have all of the event elements prepared for and ordered on time. There's, any of the swag items, the t-shirts, the medals, the whatever else is the, soup du jour of that's being provided by events. It's making sure that permits are filed properly, that you've planned your site plans to make sure that the event, I just call it that, does this make sense? You can't have portable restrooms that are before the finish line, because then you've got people crossing in front of folks who are trying to go for that last minute sprint.
Right.
And, do you have your portable restrooms? Do you have dumpsters, volunteers, all of those things? For our bigger events, being a race director starts literally the moment we pack up the truck from that event the year before. So It's a 364.9 day a year job. Mm-hmm. And, we're not doing everything every day for that event, but if you start early, then it gives you the best chance for success. And really, we want our customers, which are the participants, spectators, vendors, and our sponsors, to all feel comfortable that race day is going to be that experience that they had dreamed of.
Right. What does the process look like? And, maybe your path is unique in the way that you got to what you do now, but what does the process look like for somebody to get into race directing? It's not exactly a normal college major. There's not, a lot of education, necessarily about that. It's something that people, I feel like, maybe take for granted, and that's the thing that you want, right? As a race director or putting on event management, you don't want people to necessarily know your name, because that means something has gone wrong. But what is your path kind of looked like to get to where you are now over the past couple of years?
Yeah, my path was a little accidental. As you know, I kind of fell into this job. Mm-hmm. And I worked in the insurance industry for a decade. Mm-hmm. After I got out of college. And the short story is, I decided that was no longer for me, and I wanted to do something. I had been running with the group runs at the Columbus Running Company for a few years and thought, I really enjoy the running and walking community. Mm-hmm. I'd love to be a part of that. I went and talked to the team there and I said, can I do anything? Can I work in the store? Can I sweep your back room? I probably couldn't pay the mortgage on sweeping a back room, but is there anything I can do to be involved?
Right.
And I was asked how I felt about getting up at 4:30 every Saturday and Sunday morning to go out and produce events. And I said, well, it sounds pretty terrible, but it sounds better than working in insurance. So let's give it a shot. Mm-hmm. And went from there. It was a little bit of a learning curve. I was, like many folks probably watching this webinar, I was a participant in events. So of course I knew everything that needed to happen, and very quickly learned that I knew nothing that needed to happen. And thankfully I had a good team leading the way to make sure that I was able to comprehend the challenges and make sure that I understand that race day for a race director is not about me, it's about you.
Right. What, maybe you can talk us through just a basic example race from a small, medium, and large, and maybe define that by a general participant size, because a lot of people watching or listening are people that are pursuing running a world marathon major. Mm-hmm. If they want to run a race before that, maybe they're doing a local larger race, but then maybe they're also racing like you mentioned, a charity 5K. Yep. Right. So what are some of the main differences that you're aware of from the small, medium, and large size scale races?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of answers to that question. So first, defining the terms in generalities. So a small race, let's call that something 100 participants and under.
Sure.
Medium sized, let's call that 101 to 1,000 or so participants. And then the larger, we have 1,001 and up. And of course, even within those ranges, there's vast differences in between a 3,000 person race and a 20,000 person race.
Right.
But using those, they all have very common elements. Mm-hmm. The most important to everybody being, we have a course that we're going to participate on.
Right.
And for this example, let's use a 5K, a small charity-based 5K. we can probably operate a 100-person event on a bike path. We can do an out and back type thing. So the first step for me as I'm creating an event is who's the event for and where do they want to have it? If it's somebody that's coming to me to have some help in producing, do they have a geography preference? Something like that makes sense. If they really say we know we're only going to be 100 people, but we want to be on city streets, I'm like, okay, let's talk about your budget, see what we can do in terms of police, traffic control, those sorts of things. But really, the size can provide a lot of guidance into what's required. And I think the goal of every size race should be to provide, that A+ 100% experience from start to finish for all participants. But I think, and I don't know that anyone would probably correct me in saying this, the expectations vary based on the size of the event.
Sure.
If you sign up for an 80-person 5K, you're probably willing to allow for a sort of a backyard neighborhood style feel to the event. If you're in that medium-sized event, okay, maybe we might still sort of be on the bike path, but it's got some street aspects, and maybe we don't have a full-blown expo, but we've got a multi-day packet pickup at a local running shop, and we've got some of those elements, that the celebratory elements on race day. We've got some music, we've got maybe a band, we've got, police, those sorts of things. And then certainly when you get up into the larger events, it's really feeling like as a participant, your hand's being held the entire way through.
Right.
If the races that do things well, especially in the larger capacity events, you feel every time I have a question, it's probably answered somewhere on their website, or they're producing content via, whether it's socially, email, on their website that answers my questions, provides examples, makes me feel like this is the only thing I need to be worrying about is just my training. Everything else is taken care of.
Right.
But certainly the bigger the event is, the more pieces and parts go into that particular event.
One, kind of question I have about the larger scale side is just maybe about the running community in general and what you've seen, like you mentioned, however many years ago you did your first 5K and then did a half marathon, and how the running scene overall has changed. It seems like semi-recently, there have been a lot of major races that, celebrated their 40th anniversary. A lot of people talked about in the 1970s, 1980s, that there was this huge running boom. And now, there's maybe been a couple a little bit smaller booms overall. And there's just been these very large, well-known races that have just been established for a long time. And in that time period, there's been these, huge risings of small local races and charity races and races, like you mentioned, between that maybe 500 to 1,000 person range or something like that popping up. What's been your kind of, been your thoughts on the recent trajectory and the past couple of years of races overall?
That's a really great question. It's a little involved, and I'll try to boil it down to a couple of things.
Sure.
One of the things that's become more apparent, and I've been doing this for coming up on 8 years this summer. I was trying to count the other day. I would casually estimate I've been involved in around 500 events over the last 8 years.
Wow.
I think we talk about expectations. The expectations and the willingness for the people involved with the event to communicate the expectations has changed in the last 8 years. And generally, I think that's a positive. One of the dangers that's very easy to fall into when you have a lack of feedback is you assume that everything you're doing is correct. And hopefully that is the case, but it's not always. And sometimes it could be something as innocent as a mistake. That's non-life-threatening. Certainly, if you have life-threatening mistakes, those are things you want to address very quickly. But there are things. We had an event. You're well aware of events we've put on. We had one a few years ago where, through no immediate fault of our own, the one of the vendors we chose didn't provide what we had asked for, and it was something people let us know about. And to the participant, the fact that I'm not the one who didn't bring the right materials on event day. I'm not going to ask them to go chew out that vendor ultimately, as a race director, it's my responsibility.
Sure.
And so we redefined our processes internally, where it's not just cross your fingers and hope that vendor shows up with the right things. It's putting in some pre-race check processes to make sure that everything's going to happen the way it should be. In a perfect world, you ask somebody to do things once and it happens exactly the way you expect.
Right.
We know that that doesn't happen. And I'm sure it was not a malicious thing. We all learn. And so that's one of the things is we've been provided with more feedback recently, which has been encouraging. There are moments and days where someone tells you something you really didn't want to hear. And you take a deep breath and you realize whether it came across via email or social media as a personal attack, that's probably not how they meant it.
Right.
They want your event to succeed. Right. And that's what we want for our events, both for the ones we own and our partner events. I tell our clients all the time, this is not my event, it's yours, but I am here 24 hours a day to help you succeed. Right. And so having that additional feedback, I think that's been one of the biggest changes, both for events of all sizes. It's encouraging for me when I get home from an 80-person event to hear a little bit of feedback. You know what? Yeah, we could have done that differently, and here's how we're going to make that better going forward.
Right. I'd like to get your input on what makes the difference between, like you mentioned, you do somewhere between 70 to 80 some races a year in a normal year, right?
Right.
What is the difference between timing an event? So showing up and just providing that race timing organization versus what you mentioned about pretty much being a year-round effort to coordinate a one-day event. Like one of your banner events is the Columbus 10K, right? That's a landmark event for you guys. What's the difference between just showing up and communicating with a small organization versus putting on your own event entirely?
Yeah, that's another great question. I appreciate all of these. And first, I know you didn't intend it this way, but just so nobody thinks that timers just show up and
yes.
Timing mats. There are some things for preparation involved with timing, sure, but it's certainly less involved. You're generally, if you're doing timing only, you're working with that race director, race committee. You probably are tied into their registration platform so that you have the data, but it's making sure that your processes are prepared, you're ready to go. You can show up probably an hour and a half, 2 hours before the event starts on race day. You do your job, which is essentially making sure people get timed properly. You have your multiple backup processes in place to make sure that when one piece of technology fails, you have other pieces of technology and human technology to figure things out. In a timing capacity, we usually have 3 different timing processes happening at the same time to provide the best experience. And that's really what it's all about. If, I don't know if you've ever had the misfortune of not being timed at an event, but
I've only done your races, really mainly in the past, so I've only had good experiences.
Well, and here's my opportunity to pump Evan up a little bit. When you finish first, it's real easy to get your time
sure.
every time.
Right.
But it's happened to probably a lot of people at least once.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, whether it's a faulty tag or equipment failure or who knows what, your time didn't read at the finish line, and you maybe set a PR that day. You go home to brag to all your friends. Everybody knows runners love to talk about themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. You want to share that result on social media, and it doesn't exist. So making sure that we have those processes in place to provide that quality experience from the timing aspect.
Right.
So from a timer standpoint, the race probably begins somewhere between a few days to a few weeks beforehand, just from making sure we have what we need to have for race day. And then it ends, if we did our job right, it literally ends when we pack up the last stuff in the truck and go home.
Right.
But at the outside, within that 24 to 48 hours, as a few emails pop in and say, hey, I have some questions about this. So your time frame for the event that you're really concerned is pretty narrow.
Right.
Where as an event director, race director, you are starting with that race process probably on the inside about 6 months out. For some events, like I mentioned before, it's literally 11 months and 29 and a half days.
Right.
Where you're beginning to lay out the processes of what do we need to have done when does registration need to open for this size and distance of event, and then the race, certainly within that 4 to 6 weeks prior, you're worried about making sure all your volunteer processes are in place. Are all the vendors confirmed? When are things going to show up on race day? And for better or worse, the race does not end even for that year when we close up the truck and pack things away.
Right.
There's a lot of follow-up, and it's follow-up with the charitable organization you're working with to make sure that they are taken care of, that the monies are being transferred properly, that you're thanking all your volunteers, your staff, that you follow up with any of those emails. If someone for whatever reason came through the finish line, forgot to pick up their medal on race day, where can they have those sorts of things?
Right.
So it doesn't really work out from a math standpoint, but the race year lasts longer than a year. So
of course. Can you talk about the importance of volunteers and how somebody, maybe watching that normally runs, a couple races in their local community a year, again, in a regular year when there are races going on typically, how important is it to have a great local community of volunteers that are willing to help?
It is, and I don't use this word lightly, it is invaluable to have volunteers and quality volunteers at an event. Mm-hmm. I'm thankful and grateful that we have a wonderful community here in Columbus, Ohio, of folks who are willing to donate their time. And, we try to reward them for their participation, volunteering in our events with a variety of manners. But seeing repeated faces makes our job as event directors easier, because I know that this person has been at 5 of our events for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. I don't really have to explain to them what to do. I can say, hey, Jim, John, Deb, Jane, you're good to go. You know what's going on here. Maybe one little tiny process is tweaked from the last time we saw you. But there are so many areas that volunteers assist in. Mm-hmm. And from my standpoint as an event director and race director, why that's important is it allows us to operate at a much greater efficiency than we would if we had to rely just on our team. Mm-hmm. And you've got folks who you see on race day. Mm-hmm. You've got the people who are checking you in to get your bib number 10 minutes before the race begins. Right. You've got people who are handing you your medal, your banana, your bottle of water at the finish line. You've got folks who are manning the aid stations. Mm-hmm. that are out there on the course. Mm-hmm. And you've got people in the better events who are sitting there on a corner doing this sort of thing. Right. Sure you don't go the wrong direction. Right. And we've seen an evolution as, you mentioned the Columbus 10K. We passed our 40-year anniversary a few years ago, and we're hoping to have our 43rd running this September. Right. But the first year I put on that event, I would say we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 volunteers, mm-hmm. which admittedly in hindsight was not nearly enough. But I was very new, and we made it work. The event happened. It was fine. Everyone was safe, taken care of. Last year we had probably over 120 volunteers. Wow. Now the event has grown, so we've needed more. But really, as we identify each year, again, back to the feedback, we get feedback from folks. Where do we have areas identified that we can use additional help? Find volunteers. And I think from a participant standpoint, to realize why volunteers are important, one, from the very basic things, so I can get my stuff and so I don't get lost on the course. Right. But also you think about pricing for events. Mm-hmm. Sure, in a perfect world, we can pay for all of our race expenses with sponsorship dollars. Right. If someone can find that perfect world for me, tell me where it is, I'm going to move. We struggle a lot, all races do, to find sponsorship dollars. And so if we don't have volunteers to put on a quality event, it means we have to pay people to be there. Right. And those costs will ultimately get passed on to the registrant. Mm-hmm. And so having volunteers, people who are willing to dedicate some amount of their time, is key to ensuring that we can keep price points at a spot where people can be comfortable going out to register. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of running clubs have this message. I'll just echo it for everyone in the world. If you haven't volunteered at a race, I'm not suggesting you do so because I want to guilt you into it. It's a really powerful experience. I volunteered at a number of events before I took this job, and there's just something about being a part of an event in a way that enables you to see people just out there doing work. Right. And we all get kind of trapped into our own bubble. We train with a crew that runs about our speed. And when you're on race day, if it's a loop course, you may not see anybody that doesn't run your speed.
Right.
And being able to be standing on a corner on race day and being able to see, an Evan Schwartz type running by in first place, and then, in a 5K, 5 or 10 minutes later, you see me running by. But then there's folks that are out there walking, and it's worth remembering that we're all in this same event together. We all still have to cover that 3.1 miles, and it's difficult if you're doing it right for everybody at all ability levels.
Yeah, absolutely. One follow-up to that is if somebody listening wants to, maybe volunteer when races come back on a normal schedule, right? An in-person race. What is even the process for somebody to do that? Is it just a simple email to, whatever race is offering volunteer? What is maybe an expectation of a volunteer on race day? What are possible positions that somebody might expect that they could, offer a helping hand for a race?
Yeah, another great question. And one of the areas we've used feedback over the years to tweak our processes. When I first started doing this, I would solicit volunteers via email, not realizing that if you have a place where they can sign up, it's certainly easier to direct people there. But it was literally, I'm emailing everybody I know, hey, can you help out? Can you help out? Nowadays, all the races that we own and operate, we have a volunteer tab on our race website. So if you want to go there, you can see, here are all the different roles that you can sign up for. Here are the time frames for those. Here's what you can expect on race day. And then here's what we give you in return. And so, for example, if you want to sign up for the Columbus 10K to work our finish line area, we're going to be able to tell you that your race day begins at probably 7:15. It involves some combination of handing out medals, food, water, or just helping people through that finish line area if they need medical assistance.
Right.
It's going to run, like I said, from 7:15 to about 10:30. Probably not much heavy lifting anticipated, but there may be some. If you're working one of the water stations, we're going to tell you to wear some old shoes. But really, not just, we talk about setting expectations for participants, also setting expectations for volunteers.
Right.
An empowered volunteer is a happy volunteer. And we find the more we give the information, the more people want to come back. They realize I'm not being surprised when I show up on race day. And there are times where you run out of volunteers in a certain spot and you have to move people. And then for thank yous for our volunteers, we try to provide an event t-shirt or a volunteer t-shirt for them that day. I try to stay away from those safety yellow and safety green colors because I want them to wear these later. But then also we provide our volunteers with a free race entry to a future event that we put on. So trying to encourage that cycle of volunteering, participating, and we see a lot of folks utilize that cycle.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely awesome. We did have a question come in from Patrick. Patrick says, love your attitude, Andy. How do you measure and or evaluate your performance for an event and maybe over time? So specifically from that event management side, how do you evaluate your performance?
Yeah, that's another great question. I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, I feel like I keep saying it over and over again, but that's fantastic. And one of the things that we do internally is, we have events that operate most of the time on a year-over-year basis. And so there's two big metrics that I look at to determine our performance. One, a lot of our partner events is what I call them, clients who come to us to help put on an event. We're serving in somewhere between a timer only and a sort of a sub race director. We're not the race director for the event, but we do a lot of the things that they would normally do. And so part of that is from a marketing and growth standpoint, how have we done in terms of numbers compared to the year before? So that's a big metric for us is, are we helping this event grow?
Right.
And if not, what were the reasons for that? Was it a change in venue, time of year, things like that? Or was it something else? Was there an event production aspect that played a part? Did our website not get up until too late? Were there things that we can do differently to help that event grow? The other one, which is a little more anecdotal, but a lot more immediate feedback is, what sort of feedback am I getting via email from either potential registrants leading into race day or in that 24 to 72 hours post race day? If I have 15 to 20 emails waiting for me when I get back to an event, I know that there's things that we can do better. And if I have one of those, red banner days where I get home and there's nothing waiting for me, then I know, we probably weren't perfect, but we did a really good job that day.
Totally. I want to talk about virtual races in a second and the current state of running affairs. But first, I'd like to hear your thoughts on any races, any race directors that you're aware of right now that are doing a great job. So it can, be a marathon like New York City Marathon that has 53,000+ finishers, and they have to organize literally a whole parade for hours and hours through the city of New York. Or it can be small local races, maybe undiscovered gems, advice that you've picked up from different people in the race directing world. Do you have any people or any events that you look to for inspiration in that race event management side?
Yeah. The easy answer for me for that question is locally here in Columbus. The race director for the Nationwide Children's Hospital Columbus Marathon and Half Marathon is Darius Blackford, and he's an example for certainly all race directors. Their event is many times the size of our biggest event, and so there are certain aspects of things that they have to be responsible for that don't really apply to events I produce. But just the attitude and demeanor that you can exhibit as an event director to really show the care that you have for everyone involved in the process. And that, from a participant standpoint, it's making sure that your elites are as well taken care of as the person who finishes last. And I probably should have said that in reverse, but making sure every participant is important, that you provide valid spectator opportunities, that your volunteers feel empowered and valuable at the event, that all of your sponsors and vendors understand that this race is for them too, and certainly from that particular event, that the charity is first and foremost in everything that they do. But that's Darius is a great example of someone who's taken an event that was really, really, really good to begin with and just made it, one of those gems of the Midwest. I've been fortunate enough the last few falls to participate, not nearly as fast as I would have liked to complete those courses, but it was worth every second that I spent out there. And then certainly there's a number of race directors that I work with that I think probably spend too much time being a race director, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. Do you want me to name names? I would be happy to name a name.
Because we have a worldwide audience, just the general concepts I think are good to be shared, but definitely, people that you think do a good job to name names is absolutely fine. What you feel comfortable with.
Well, if Carl, if you're watching this, I'm talking about you. But there's a fellow I work with named Carl. And he really goes above and beyond in his committee, his entire committee. There's the running club puts on this event. Carl just happens to be the president and my main contact, but they own that event and they feel it. I'm certain if I were to, cut them in half, and that's kind of gross, but the race would just bleed out of them.
Sure.
And that comes through in everything they do. And that's just super impressive to me. We have some events, and you've all seen them and been a part of them, that the event very obviously exists as a fundraiser. There's nothing wrong with that, but the purpose of the event is to raise funds. The purpose of a really great event may be a part of it, but it's to serve the race and to serve everybody involved. And you can tell those events that just spend time worrying about the experience. And I think if you were to ask me, what do you spend most of your time doing as a race director? It's trying to figure out all the things as a participant that I would want to know, that I would want to experience, and how do I make it happen? How do I'm a kind of a professional worrier. Like, what's going to happen on race day? What are all the things that could happen? And how can I do my best to make sure they don't? Certainly as we're looking at larger events around the country and the world, it's easy to look at the World Marathon Majors. Any event that has more than 10,000 people, they probably have a pretty good team operating, because it's very difficult to put on an event of that size without having a good team. But if you're a smaller race, sometimes those lessons, they're hard to distill into a smaller experience. And so you've got to have hopefully a great team around you to say, okay, we don't have 26 miles from, Hopkinton to Boston, but how can we take what they're doing and add that to our experience?
Right. Totally. Maybe one last question about race day experience in general. As a race director, what can you say about like the electricity in the air as that build up to like the start gun going off? Like, what can you talk about? Because that's my favorite part about being a volunteer, running a race, just going to spectate a race. Like, I'm one of the crazy people that just goes to watch a race, even if it's like a local race that I'm not participating or volunteering in, just because I want to see people running. What's that type of electricity like to you?
Yeah, and first I'll correlate it to my experience as a participant. I'm famous, like I'm sure many of us are, for going out way too fast at an event. Sure. And it's not because of a lack of training and pace work and all that kind of stuff. It's just you get so daggone excited as the gun's ready to go off that you've been pent up. You've probably been in taper mode. So it's like, let's just get out there and fly. And then you look down at your watch about a quarter mile in, and you realize you're running somewhere between 15 to an hour, a minute and 30 seconds under pace. Right. And you better dial it back. That's no different for race directors. Mm-hmm. One of the things I was completely unprepared for at the first time I directed a race on my own, which was the Columbus 10K back in 2013, was to the sort of nerves that came through on event day, both to make sure that everything happened, make sure we get through this day. But it was, as you get to that 2-minute countdown, 1-minute countdown, I almost cried at the start line, just like, I figured let's just be honest, right? It's an emotional experience. And part of it is you're seeing the work that you put in for, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 11 months, and 29 and a half days. All of that is about this very moment. Mm-hmm. And I think you can tell the race directors that really care, because they get super excited on race day too. And whether that manifests itself in, a race director almost breaking down in tears, or the guys who just can't stay off the microphone and can't stop talking because they're so excited. But it's what the other thing I wasn't prepared for, and this happens at every event that I get to, is to be moved by the sense of accomplishment on so many people that are crossing that finish line. As a participant, we only have our experiment of one. Mm-hmm. I know what it feels like for me to cross the finish line. Sometimes you're excited, sometimes you're disappointed. Most of the time you're relieved it's over. But whatever that may be, seeing the faces of people who have very obviously given it everything they had. Mm-hmm. We've all seen the people come across. It happens a lot in cross country in high school. They cross the finish line and it's like the sniper got them from the upper levels. Right. Go down, there's nothing left to give. Right. But then in the adult setting, they can keep moving, but it's like, oh my gosh, I've got nothing left to provide this day. I'm kicking my feet up. I'm not even mowing the lawn. This is it. Right. And then people will come up to you and they just want to talk to somebody. And they want to say, I wanted to let you know that I've been training for 6 months and this was my first 5K. The most profound experience I had, it was 3 years ago, the day after Thanksgiving. We put on an event, and it's a relatively small race, just something to do on Black Friday.
Is it the leftover?
The leftover run, yep. Yeah. And I had my lead bicyclist, he came back and he said, I just want to let you know that the last place person is at about the third of a mile mark. And I thought, well, this is going to happen awful fast. I didn't expect we'd be done that quickly. He said, no, he's still heading out. I thought, okay, we're in for a day. That's fine. We're here for him. Mm-hmm. And we had our sweeper crew that's there with him. Mm-hmm. He gets back. It's a 76-year-old man walking with his walker. He gets done. He sits down on the walker and he just does this. And he says, I'm 76 years old. I've been training for 9 months. This is the first 5K I've ever done. Mm. He said, bring me a damn medal. I just thought that was so awesome. His whole family was there. They were there to encourage him. But being able to see people experience those various, the varying degrees of accomplishment is just, that's what I get up for in the morning. I don't like getting up at 4:30. I don't like setting up stuff in the dark, but I do love seeing people be able to accomplish their goals.
Right. Absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit to the current state of things. Obviously, this webinar series started, a couple months ago now, at the advent of the fact that, hey, we're not going to be able to run races for the near future. What are your thoughts on the amount of virtual races and the concept of virtual racing popping up and getting a little bit more popular, having a little bit more traction now?
Yeah, and virtual races have been around for a while. Typically what we've all seen through probably social media, there's some virtual event company that has pushed a paid promotion on your timeline. And we used to see these all the time. I'm sure they still exist. The Mother's Day virtual 5K, and we got 500 spots to sell out. We're going to mail you the t-shirt, the medal, the bib number, and share your pictures on social media. And so those have existed for a while. And it wasn't something for a lot of our physical events that we work with. Certainly you can integrate a virtual component, and we started to see more events do that. And what that meant to them, even up until 3 months ago, was mostly, we'd call it probably something like a t-shirt sale, right? I want to participate in the event, I want to support, but I can't be there on race day. If Evan says, hey, Andy, I want to do the Columbus 10K this year, but I can't be there, can I just buy a registration, you send me a t-shirt? We'd figure out a way to do that. And so we started to see some races add in that sort of virtual participation, but it wasn't an actual participation. It was, can you send me a shirt?
Right.
What we started to see more, and I'm sure this has existed before, but as we lost the ability to do these in-person events, we're all competitors. We all have trained for things. We want to go out and run hard. And I'm like anybody else. If I go out and run hard, I want to see my name on the results page. So let's figure out a way to sort of translate that physical event experience that we all know and love and put it into something that's probably not going to be an exact replica, but maybe a reasonable facsimile of what we would experience in an in-person event. And so we're trying to have, we talked earlier about the digital community management. The really good events that are in the virtual space have Facebook pages, discussion groups, and they're really cultivating that sense of community. And so that's your pre-race sort of experience. You're sending out newsletters, social media content. The ones I think do it best, you're receiving your materials in the mail prior to your scheduled, whether it's event day, week, month, whatever it is. So that if I want to be that person who's going to run in my neighborhood with the bib number strapped on and the race t-shirt, I can do that. I think there's value in that virtual event feel to having those materials ready for you. And then I'm sure we've all seen it. We've all got runner friends on our social media timelines and our friends list. In the last 2 months, I know I've seen this probably every Saturday and Sunday for the last 2 months. There's someone who's had their children draw a finish line on their driveway, and mom comes back from running a half marathon. There's, their partner there to put the medal across their neck. And the first time I saw it, I thought, that's genius. I can direct a race and I can be sitting here in my pajamas. But also from their standpoint, they're really recreating the best parts of race day.
Right.
And also one of the cool things about virtual, I know you haven't asked me this question yet, but one of the things I really like is you get to do it wherever you want.
Right.
We're all in our own communities sort of locked into, there's like maybe that 1 to 10 different typical 5K courses. Hopefully they're great. And they probably exist for very good reasons. We've also got our favorite training routes. If I really like that route from my house down to the barn on Smith Road and around the loop and come back because it's pretty, and I always wish there was a 5K there, but I know, Farmer Jones isn't going to shut down his farm, so I can do a 5K. Well, now I can do that 5K wherever I want.
Absolutely.
I'm contemplating an event myself that will be not something people can sign up for, but I thought, well, I could run a marathon around the block here at my neighborhood. It would be just under 41 times around the block. But that means for me, I get 41 aid stations, man. That's pretty sweet.
That is true. Yeah, let's talk just a little bit more about what people might look for, from a expert about literally putting on the best race day experience. If somebody's going through, somebody might not want to call it a virtual race. They might want to refer to it as a time trial because their training is being applied to a time trial because they see it as that reaching a certain mark, right? What can people incorporate in their personal lives, day-to-day running routine if they want to target a virtual race or a time trial? What's something that they can add in? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure if this will answer exactly the question you're asking, but I think as a runner making the transition from in-person events to virtual, I think it's important to know what motivates you as a participant. If you're in it for the competition, then maybe seek out those events that allow for virtual results submission. And if you really, really care about competition and awards and age group placement are important to you, finding those events that have the appropriate ways to adjudicate results. Do I have to submit a screenshot of my watch, submit a time to one of the reporting mechanisms, whether it's Strava, Garmin Connect, whatever that case may be. So find out what's important to you. If it's competition, look for those. If it's the cause, and there's lots of cause-based participants out there, maybe you don't care as much about the time aspect, but you care about making sure the most money goes to that event and seeking out events that will generate funds for causes you care about. And if you just like the event experience, then seek out those events that are offering some really sweet swag. Swag has not taken a back seat in the virtual event world. If anything, in a lot of cases, it can be the most important thing for some people. If you don't have a medal that will, wash your car, then, get out of my sight, but really it's what's in it for me is the question for a lot of people, and that's fine. And so there's events out there for people of all interest levels. We're seeing that more with these challenge-based events sort of becoming a thing. So if you care about being consistent in your running, find one of those events that last 1, 2, 4 months and rewards consistency. Do that. If you like the medals and the t-shirts, find those that are giving out the sweet swag, and then sign up for those, do them, and take some great pictures on social media, because that's what it's all about, is letting people know that we are out here doing stuff.
Absolutely. We did have a question come in about your expectations and thoughts as we hopefully in the future transition from a more solo virtual based race scenario back to large marathons or large races. Do you expect large marathons to come back? Will they be smaller in a form? What are your just general anticipations or thoughts on that subject?
I think that's a question that's a little difficult for me to answer because there's a lot of variables. One, we all live in different parts of the country and the world, and rules, regulations are different everywhere. And also the entrenchment of this virus is also different depending on where we are. I am a little more cautious than some when it comes to how we're treating our potential return to normal events. And I think things that, rather than say, do I think things will return to size before a vaccine? Whatever I would say is just going to be a guess. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an epidemiologist. I think we all hope that they will, and I hope there's a safe way to do that. But I think as event directors, we have to consider first and foremost the safety of everyone involved in our event. Is there a way for us to do what we typically do in a manner that allows everyone to not just feel safe? And we understand as humans, and with the placebo effect, feeling safe means something. Mm-hmm. If people don't feel safe, they're not going to sign up. And from a dollars and cents standpoint, that's maybe as important as anything else, but also to be safe. If, I saw something this morning during my daily watching YouTube over breakfast, that there was an event, a sporting event that happened back in February that was later identified as, I don't remember the exact terminology they used, but it was basically, a problem bomb. You get 70,000 people in one spot, and then a few weeks later, oh my gosh, this happened. I think as event directors, it's not a selfish reason that we don't want that to be associated with our event. It's literally, I care about everyone that's involved at my events. And I don't want you to be in a position that is potentially unsafe. And so if there's not a way for us to do that, that's financially viable. We've seen a lot of things in the timer and race director circle of what can we do to make this return to normal happen faster. Mm-hmm. And people have lots of great ideas that as soon as you start thinking of them, like, okay, we could do that, but that would also add $10,000 to expense for a 500-person race, which is just not viable to have happen. We've also seen a lot of events, and this has been starting very small, is they start to take some of these social distancing aspects and make no-touch races, socially distant races. You know, taking a 200-person 5K and spreading it out over a 3-hour time period where you have people sign up for, you know, well, let's call them corrals, but time corrals. I'm going to sign up for the 7 to 7:15 window. I'm not to report to the event until 15 minutes before my window begins. I go up to the check-in desk. I have someone from behind the plexiglass screen that will assign me a number. I go to the start line. The race director's there about 10 feet away. He's sending us off individually every minute or so. So there are things that are starting to happen as race directors and timers. We're finding ways to provide an experience for those of us who really want and need it. And we're all, you know, I need to produce events. I'm an organizer at heart, and sitting here at home typing on my computer all day is valuable, but it's not fun. So we're trying to find ways to get back. You know, the issue I think we're all going to find is how do we scale from a 200-person event? You know, I saw something that someone had done the math, and if you take the LA Marathon and apply social distancing to the start corrals, they would stretch for nearly 4 miles.
Oh, wow.
I don't know any city that's going to allow you to shut down 4-mile stretch of road for a start corral.
Right.
So we're all collectively as an industry, we're working to find the ways forward. Certainly the hope is first and foremost that a vaccine comes along sooner than we hope. Mm-hmm. And we're all able to get back to doing all these things we want to do. But in the absence of that vaccine, how can we provide the biggest, best, and most importantly, safest race experience for everyone out there?
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a great point. We did have one more comment that trickled in from Patrick Buckley, who said, makes me want to volunteer. So if anything, I think this webinar is useful to just inform people that you can, in fact, volunteer at races, you know, in some capacity, hopefully in the near future. Again, one more lighthearted thing I want to end on here is what has been the most innovative approach or inclusion or race medal or way about somebody has put on a race that you've seen? Have you seen unique and innovative things come out of different races? And if anything sticks in your mind in general, the one thing I want to plug is you put on a race called the Choo Choo 9 Miler, and one year the prizes, I think, were train whistles. Is that right? Yeah. Like the wooden train whistles. And that's one of my most prized possessions. It's so unique and fun. So anything maybe along that route that you've seen in your you know, scope of the race directing world?
Yeah, as you started asking the question, I was trying to think just about the last few months within this new virtual world that we're experiencing. And I think my answer to that particular question would be races that are encouraging that sense of community.
Right.
I'm hopeful that we're all seeing this in our own individual communities, that the running and walking communities have banded together. Mm-hmm. And we're being encouraging. I know we've got a couple groups here in Columbus that were born out of this pandemic that we're in, and seeing folks that I didn't know there were so many runners out here. I mean, obviously I see hundreds and thousands of runners on a weekly basis.
Right.
But even in my neighborhood, there's people that can't go to the gym now, so they would usually run on a treadmill. They're running by my house. I'm like, this is awesome.
Right.
Having those races centered around those communities where people can see, all right, there's someone who runs a 16-minute 5K. Mm-hmm. There's someone who their first one, they've got a bum hip or whatever the case may be, and they're struggling to do an hour and 30 minutes in a 5K. We're all out here together. Mm-hmm. and really making sure that everyone knows that we're all here for each other. And I think maybe I would imagine even those of us who are running 15-minute 5Ks, it's helpful to have community.
Sure.
But it's extremely important for those of us who maybe have never taken part in an event before.
Yeah.
And so how do we get them comfortable with being a part of something? Okay, you don't have to be around other people. Not that that's the reason you weren't doing it before, but how can we make them know that it's okay that you were struggling? You know, I saw something yesterday. There was a person in one of our local running online communities who had targeted a specific time for her virtual 10K. She missed it by a minute and a half, and she was upset about it. Everyone chimed in. You know, there's of course the folks who I would have been happy to run that on my best day in the world, but really someone saying, you got out there, you ran, hopefully you had fun doing it, so you didn't make your mark. And I was the race director for that particular event. I said, you've got still 10 days left to submit times. Just go do it again.
Sure.
Whatever you want to do. So I think right now it's those races that are celebrating community, and really, I don't want to, again, give him too big of a head, but Darius and the team at the Columbus Marathon, everything about that event revolves around the Children's Hospital experience. They revamped their course to run by, you're 100 yards away from the windows, but seeing those kids at the window waving at you, they've got, at every mile, you're reminded of why you're participating in this event. And so those events who really, they know what they are, and they, one of the truisms or the cliches I use with my partner race directors is decide what you are, be the heck out of it, and don't apologize for it. Every race should be something different. And the ones who truly take that to heart, they know what they are, and they just put everything into being that. Those are the races that people will come back to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point to wrap up on too. The last thing I want to get in here is if anybody is curious about finding more information about what you do, who you work with, where can they find you?
I work for the Columbus Running Company. We exist online at columbusrunning.com. We just revamped our website. Please stop by, check out all the things we have going on. We, of course, do races, which where I'm involved. We have 4 retail doors. We're running a walking specialty shop. We're hoping within the next 15 to 20 days to open up our 5th door. So got an online presence. But yeah, come visit us at Columbus Running. If you're all in the Columbus area and ever want to take part in a race, head on over to the upcoming events, and hopefully we'll see you out there on the road sometime.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, Andy, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It was great to catch up with you, but great to hear your input and information on the current state of race affairs and then the future of that as well. We will be back with another episode next week. For now, this wraps up this episode. Thank you again, Andy, so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Evan.